She tested her husband by saying, "I got fired today." But what she overheard next changed everything. Claire Robbins was 32 years old, and 3 months ago she made a decision that shattered her marriage but reclaimed her power. She sat in her car outside the home she'd purchased in an upscale neighborhood just outside Atlanta, Georgia, rehearsing the lie she was about to tell her husband. "Jackson, I got fired today." 5 words. Simple, but those 5 words would expose the truth she'd been blind to for the past 4 years. Claire wasn't some insecure wife imagining problems where none existed. She had built a successful career as a senior marketing executive at a Fortune 500 tech company, pulling in around $145,000 a year. Her husband, Jackson, worked from home on various entrepreneurial ventures, a consulting gig here, a startup idea there, bringing in maybe $25,000 on a good year. They weren't millionaires, but they were more than comfortable. They had a beautiful 3-bedroom home that Claire had purchased before they married, took luxury vacations twice a year, and maintained separate finances with Claire covering most of the household expenses. Or so she'd convinced herself was fair. The truth was Claire had started noticing things, small things at first. The way Jackson would suddenly perk up whenever she mentioned her year-end bonus, how he'd become oddly fixated on her career trajectory, asking pointed questions about her 401k vesting schedule and stock option grants. The way he'd started making grand public gestures on social media about being her biggest supporter, while showing zero interest in her actual work stress or the late nights that left her exhausted. But the real alarm bell had rung 2 weeks ago. Claire had returned early from a business trip to San Francisco, cutting it short by a day after closing a major deal ahead of schedule. Exhausted but exhilarated, she'd entered the house quietly, not wanting to disturb Jackson if he was on a work call. As she'd set down her luggage in the foyer, she'd heard Jackson's voice drifting from his home office down the hall, animated and energized in a way he rarely was with her anymore. "Marcus, I'm telling you, just 7 more months. Once we hit that 5-year mark, the spousal support calculation changes completely in my favor. My advisor says I could be looking at $2,500 a month for at least 3 years, maybe longer." The squeak of Claire's suitcase wheels had cut through the air like a knife. The conversation stopped abruptly. When Claire appeared in the doorway of his office, Jackson had been sitting at his desk, phone pressed to his ear, his expression cycling rapidly from surprise to something that looked almost like guilt before settling into casual warmth. He'd quickly wrapped up the call with a breezy, "Yeah, man, we'll talk later. My wife just got home," and smiled at her like she was the best part of his day. "Didn't expect you back until tomorrow," he'd said, his voice just a touch too casual, too practiced. Claire had played it off, mentioning the early deal closure, accepting his congratulatory hug, letting him order her favorite takeout for dinner. But that overheard fragment had lodged itself in her mind like a splinter she couldn't ignore. 5-year mark. Spousal support calculation. My advisor. They'd been married for 4 years and 8 months. For the next 2 weeks, Claire had watched her husband with new clarity, seeing patterns she'd rationalized away for too long. She'd noticed how he'd started positioning himself on social media as the supportive husband sacrificing for his wife's career, despite never actually sacrificing anything. How he'd begun casually asking about her grandmother's inheritance, the $85,000 Claire had invested years ago, wondering aloud if it might be smart to put it in both their names. How he'd stopped contributing even his minimal share to groceries and utilities, letting her pick up the slack without comment while he focused on getting his business off the ground. And then there were the searches she'd accidentally seen on his laptop when she'd borrowed it for a work emergency. Tabs left open. How long married to get spousal support? Maximizing alimony from high-earning spouse. Does prenup expire after 5 years? From the outside, Claire Robbins had built exactly the kind of life she'd dreamed about in business school. At 32, she was on the VP track at TechVance Solutions, one of Atlanta's fastest-growing tech companies. Her title was Senior Director of Marketing Strategy, and her salary of $145,000 put her firmly in the top tier of earners in her age bracket. The 3-bedroom craftsman-style home she'd purchased in the sought-after Druid Hills neighborhood 5 years ago, before she'd even met Jackson, had appreciated by nearly 40%. Her 401k was healthy, her investment portfolio steady, and she'd even inherited $85,000 from her grandmother 3 years ago, which she'd invested wisely. By every measurable metric, Claire had made it. Her marriage to Jackson Robbins had seemed like the final piece of that picture-perfect puzzle. They'd met at a networking event 4.5 years ago. She'd been giving a talk on digital marketing trends, and he'd approached her afterward, charming and confident, telling her he was building a consulting business, helping small companies develop their brand strategies. He was handsome in that effortless way some men managed, with an easy smile and the kind of enthusiasm that made his entrepreneurial dreams sound inevitable rather than aspirational. They'd married after dating for 6 months, a small ceremony at a vineyard outside the city. Jackson had moved into Claire's house, and she'd told herself the imbalance didn't matter. He was building something. He was taking risks. She was established. He was still finding his footing. That's what partnerships were about, supporting each other through different seasons of life. Except Jackson's season had never quite changed. For years later, his consulting business remained a collection of one-off projects that brought in maybe $20,000 to $25,000 a year on a good stretch. He worked from home, his office the converted sunroom off the kitchen, always busy with calls and strategy sessions and pitches that never quite materialized into sustainable income. Claire had stopped asking about his revenue after the first year, not wanting to seem like she was keeping score, not wanting to be the kind of wife who measured her husband's worth in dollar signs. But lately, things had shifted in ways that made Claire's instincts prickle with unease. It had started subtly, maybe 6 months ago. Jackson had begun asking more pointed questions about her career trajectory. Not the supportive "how was your day?" questions, but specific inquiries about her promotion timeline, her bonus structure, her long-term compensation package. At first, Claire had been pleased. Finally, he was taking an interest in the work that consumed so much of her time and energy. "So when does your next stock option grant vest?" he'd asked one morning over coffee, casual as if he were asking about the weather. "June next year," Claire had replied, not thinking much of it. "Why?" "Just curious. I mean, we should probably understand our full financial picture, right? For planning purposes." It made sense. Couples should know these things. But then came the questions about her 401k, her life insurance policy through work, whether she'd updated her beneficiaries since they'd married. He'd even suggested, more than once, that she should keep meticulous records of her income and bonuses for tax purposes, going so far as to set up a shared spreadsheet where she was supposed to log every paycheck, every bonus, every stock grant. "We need documentation," Jackson had insisted when Claire questioned whether it was really necessary. "You never know when the IRS might come asking questions. Better to have everything organized." Then there were the social media posts. Jackson had always been active online, but in the past year, his posts about their marriage had taken on a particular tone. Photos of him bringing her coffee while she worked late at the dining room table, captioned, "Proud to support my brilliant wife while she changes the world." Pictures of them at company events with captions like, "Standing by my powerhouse partner. Her success is our success." Selfies from his home office. "Working hard on my own projects while making sure my wife has everything she needs to thrive in her career." At first, Claire had been touched, but something about the performative nature of it had started to feel off, especially because Jackson showed virtually no interest in her actual work when they were alone. He never asked about the campaigns she was running or the challenges she was navigating. During dinner, he'd scroll through his phone while she talked about her day, offering distracted ahas, "And that's great, babe," without looking up. The real wake-up call had come 2 weeks ago. Claire had been in San Francisco for a major client pitch, a 3-day trip that she'd been preparing for obsessively. The presentation had gone so well that the client had signed the contract on the spot, a $2.3 million deal that would secure Claire's path to VP and likely mean a substantial bonus. She'd called Jackson immediately, elated, and made the decision to catch an earlier flight home, wanting to celebrate rather than sit through another night of hotel room solitude. She'd arrived home around 7 in the evening, earlier than Jackson expected. The house had been quiet when she'd let herself in, her rolling suitcase making its familiar rumble across the hardwood floors of the foyer. She'd been about to call out to Jackson when she'd heard his voice coming from his office, animated and energized in a way that made her pause. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but something in his tone, excited, conspiratorial, had made her stop at the edge of the hallway. "Marcus, I'm telling you, just 7 more months," Jackson was saying, his voice carrying clearly from the partially open office door. "Once we hit that 5-year mark, the spousal support calculation changes completely in my favor. My advisor says I could be looking at $2,500 a month for at least 3 years, maybe longer. At her income level, the court calculates it as maintaining the marital standard of living." Claire's blood had gone cold. Yeah, I know it sounds mercenary," Jackson continued, a hint of laughter in his voice. "But look, I've put in the time, right? I've been the supportive husband. I've sacrificed my own career growth to be here while she climbs the ladder. That has value. That's what spousal support is for." The squeak of Claire's suitcase while as she'd shifted her weight had cut through the air like a gunshot. The conversation stopped immediately. Claire had forced herself to move forward, to appear in the doorway of Jackson's office with what she hoped was a natural smile. Jackson had been sitting at his desk, phone to his ear, his expression cycling through surprise, something that looked almost like panic, and then settling into warm pleasure. "Hey man, I've got to go," he'd said into the phone, smooth and easy. "My wife just got home. We'll catch up later." He'd ended the call and crossed the room to embrace her. "You're back early. Did the pitch go okay?" "Better than okay," Claire had managed, letting him hug her even as her mind screamed at her to pull away. "They signed on the spot. That's amazing, babe. I'm so proud of you." His enthusiasm had sounded genuine, his smile warm. "We should celebrate. Let me order from that Italian place you love." And just like that, they'd moved into a normal evening, dinner, wine, conversation about her successful trip. Jackson had been attentive, asking questions, seeming genuinely interested. Claire had tried to convince herself she'd misheard, that the conversation had been about something else, someone else. But she knew what she'd heard. 5-year mark. Spousal support calculation. My advisor. They'd been married for 4 years and 8 months. For the next 2 weeks, Claire had watched her husband the way a scientist observes a specimen under a microscope. Every interaction became data. Every conversation, a potential clue. She noticed how Jackson had stopped contributing even his minimal share to household expenses, letting her Venmo requests for groceries and utilities go unanswered while claiming his business was in a cash flow crunch. She noticed how he'd started documenting things, taking photos of himself doing household chores, saving receipts for the rare occasions he bought groceries, keeping a calendar where he noted every time he supported her career by handling something domestic. Most damning of all, she'd borrowed his laptop one evening when hers was updating, needing to respond to an urgent work email. When she'd opened his browser, she'd seen the tabs he'd left open. Georgia's spousal support calculator. How many years married to qualify for alimony? Does prenup expire after 5 years? Maximizing spousal support from high-earning wife. Claire had closed the tabs without saying a word, finished her email, and handed the laptop back with a casual "thanks, babe." But inside, something had crystallized into absolute clarity. Her husband wasn't building a life with her. He was building a case against her. And she had 7 months, maybe less, to figure out what to do about it. Claire had always prided herself on being strategic, analytical, the kind of person who made decisions based on data rather than emotion. It was what made her exceptional at her job. The ability to see patterns, to gather evidence, to build airtight presentations that left no room for doubt. Now she would apply those same skills to her marriage. For the next 2 weeks, Claire became a researcher in her own home, documenting everything while maintaining the carefully constructed facade of the devoted, slightly guilty high-earning wife who worried she wasn't present enough, wasn't supportive enough, wasn't doing enough to make her husband feel valued. It was a role she'd been playing for longer than she cared to admit. Jackson made it easy. His pattern of behavior, once she knew to look for it, was so consistent it was almost textbook. Every morning, he'd make a show of bringing her coffee in her home office before she logged on for the day. "Can't have my superstar wife starting the day without fuel," he'd say, kissing the top of her head. Then he'd linger just long enough to snap a photo. Claire at her desk, coffee in hand, looking appropriately professional and focused, which would appear on his Instagram within the hour. Caption: my morning routine, making sure my brilliant wife has everything she needs to conquer the business world. Hashtag supportive husband, hashtag power couple, hashtag proud of her. The posts got dozens of likes. Friends commented about how lucky Claire was to have such a supportive partner. His mother shared them with heart emojis. But when Claire would come home after a brutal 12-hour day, exhausted and stressed, Jackson would be on the couch with his laptop, barely looking up. "Long day?" he'd ask, eyes still on his screen. "The longest," Claire would reply, dropping her bag by the door. "The Henderson campaign is falling apart, and I've got 3 presentations to prep for tomorrow's executive meeting." Jackson would nod absently, scrolling through whatever he was looking at. Then, after a beat, "You're choosing work over us again." Not a question. A statement. A judgment. "I'm not choosing anything, Jackson. This is my job." I know. He'd close his laptop with a sigh that sounded like patience wearing thin. "I just miss having a wife who's actually present, you know? But hey, your career is important." "I get it." The guilt trip was so subtle, so expertly delivered, that Claire had fallen for it countless times before. Apologizing, trying to make it up to him, feeling like she was failing at being a good partner because she was succeeding at being a good executive. Now she saw it for what it was, positioning. Jackson had moved on from the indirect guilt to more direct financial inquiries. He'd started asking about her grandmother's inheritance with increasing frequency. "So that $85,000 from your grandmother," he'd said one evening, casual as if discussing the weather. "It's just sitting in your investment account, right? Have you thought about maybe putting it in both our names? I mean, we're married. Shouldn't we have joint access to our assets?" Claire had kept her expression neutral. "It's invested in a diversified portfolio. I'd rather not move it right now. The market timing isn't great." "I'm not saying move it, just add me as a joint account holder. For emergencies. What if something happened to you and I couldn't access it?" That's what beneficiary designations are for. Jackson had dropped it, but she could see the frustration in the tightness around his mouth. 3 days later, he'd asked about her life insurance. "I was thinking, babe, you should probably increase your coverage through work. You're the primary breadwinner, and if something happened to you, I'd be in a really tough spot financially. Have you updated your beneficiaries recently? Made sure everything's current? I'm sure it's fine. But when was the last time you checked? These things are important, Claire. We need to protect each other." She'd promised to look into it, knowing she'd do no such thing. The questions kept coming. Her disability insurance. How much would it pay if she couldn't work? Her stock options. When exactly did the next batch vest? Her bonus structure. Was it guaranteed or performance-based? When she was tired, he framed her exhaustion as neglect. When she worked late, he documented it. She found a calendar on his desk one afternoon, carefully noting each evening she'd worked past 7, each business trip she'd taken, each time she'd been too tired to go out with his friends. He was building a narrative, the sacrificing husband, the career-obsessed wife. Claire made an appointment with an attorney. Rebecca Chandler's office was in a sleek high-rise in Buckhead, all glass and steel and expensive minimalist furniture. Rebecca herself was in her mid-40s, sharply dressed, with the kind of direct gaze that suggested she'd seen every trick in the book and had countered most of them successfully. "Tell me what's going on," Rebecca said, once they were seated in her conference room. Claire laid it out methodically, the overheard conversation, the timeline, Jackson's pattern of behavior, the browser history, the social media positioning. She'd brought printed screenshots, a timeline of his financial questions, examples of his guilt-tripping language. Rebecca listened without interrupting, her expression growing more knowing with each detail. "This is textbook strategic positioning," Rebecca said when Claire finished. "And you're right to be concerned. What you're describing is a pattern I see increasingly with high-earning women married to underemployed partners. Tell me I'm not crazy." "You're not crazy. You're being targeted." Rebecca pulled out a legal pad. "Here's what's happening. Some partners deliberately underemploy themselves while their spouse climbs the career ladder. They create a lifestyle that's dependent on the higher earner's income, position themselves publicly as the supportive spouse making sacrifices, then time the divorce to maximize their spousal support payout." Claire's stomach twisted even though she'd suspected as much. "In Georgia, the 5-year mark is significant," Rebecca continued. Courts look at the length of the marriage when determining spousal support duration. Under 5 years, support is typically limited. Over 5 years, especially when there's a significant income disparity, the duration increases substantially. At your income level and his lack of earnings, he could potentially receive $2,000 to $2,500 a month for 3 to 5 years, maybe longer. So everything I overheard was likely accurate. He's been consulting someone, probably a friend who's been through a similar divorce, or maybe even an attorney himself. Rebecca leaned forward. The social media posts, the documentation of your work hours, the narrative he's building about sacrificing for your career, it's all designed to support a spousal support claim. What do I do? First, we gather evidence. You need proof that his intentions are mercenary, that he's strategically positioning himself for divorce. Sometimes people reveal their true priorities when they think the money is gone. Rebecca's expression turned calculating. Have you considered testing him? Claire felt something cold and determined settle in her chest. I'm listening. That evening, Claire did her own research. She started with Marcus Brennan, Jackson's closest friend, and the person he'd been talking to on the phone that night. It took less than an hour to find what she was looking for. Marcus had been married to Dr. Sophia Brennan, a cardiovascular surgeon, for 6 years. Their divorce had been finalized 3 years ago. According to the public records Claire accessed through a legal database, Marcus had received a settlement of $175,000 plus 3 years of spousal support at $2,000 per month, a total package worth over $240,000. Marcus, who had worked sporadically as a freelance marketing consultant during his marriage, bringing in maybe $30,000 a year. Marcus, who Jackson met with twice a week for coffee. Marcus, who was apparently his advisor. Claire's hands trembled as she clicked through the documents. This wasn't just about Jackson's calculated exploitation. He'd had a mentor, a blueprint, a successful example of exactly how to extract maximum financial benefit from a high-earning wife. She went back to Jackson's laptop that night, after he'd gone to bed. This time she didn't just look at the open tabs. She went into his search history, methodically scrolling back months. The searches painted a damning picture. How long married to get spousal support Georgia? Maximize alimony from working wife. Does prenup expire after 5 years? They didn't have a prenup. Strategic underemployment spousal support. Document wife neglect marriage. Georgia spousal support calculator high income. Can wife's inheritance be considered marital property? The earliest searches dated back 14 months. More than a year before that conversation she'd overheard. Jackson hadn't just been planning this for weeks or months. He'd been planning it for over a year, carefully positioning himself, carefully building his case, carefully waiting for that 5-year mark that would maximize his payout. Claire took screenshots of everything, backed them up to her personal cloud storage, then cleared the evidence that she'd been looking. When she climbed into bed next to Jackson, he stirred slightly, reaching for her hand in his sleep. An automatic gesture that might have once seemed sweet, but now felt like just another performance. Claire lay awake in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, as the full reality settled over her like a weighted blanket. Jackson wasn't her partner. She wasn't his wife. She was his retirement plan, his exit strategy, his long-term investment that was 7 months away from maturity. But unlike a stock or a bond, Claire could act. She could think. She could plan. And she had 7 months to beat him at a game he didn't even know they were both playing. Claire sat in her car in the driveway for a full 5 minutes, staring at the front door of the house she'd bought with her own money, preparing to walk into her own home and lie to her own husband. The recording app on her phone was already active, tucked discreetly in the pocket of her blazer. Rebecca had confirmed it was legal. Georgia was a one-party consent state, meaning Claire could record any conversation she was part of. More importantly, anything she overheard in her own home, even if she wasn't directly involved in the conversation, was also fair game. Sometimes people reveal their true priorities when they think the money is gone, Rebecca had said. And we need him to reveal it in his own words. Claire checked her reflection in the rearview mirror one last time. She'd intentionally dressed down today. No power suit, no carefully applied makeup, just slacks and a wrinkled blouse. She'd messed up her hair slightly, added tiredness to her expression. She needed to look devastated, defeated, broken. She needed to look like a woman whose entire world had just collapsed. Taking a deep breath, Claire grabbed her bag and walked to the front door. Her hand trembled slightly as she turned the key, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of what she was about to do. Jackson was exactly where she expected him to be. In his home office, the converted sunroom where he spent his days on business calls and strategy sessions that never seemed to generate actual income. Through the French doors, she could see him at his desk, laptop open, surrounded by the scattered papers and motivational books that served as props for his entrepreneurial theater. She pushed open the door, and he looked up with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Hey babe, you're home early. Everything okay?" Claire let her bag slip from her shoulder to the floor with a heavy thud. She wrapped her arms around herself, adopting the posture of someone trying to physically hold herself together. "Jackson, we need to talk." Her voice cracked perfectly. "Not too much, just enough. Something happened at work today." His smile faltered. "What is it? What's wrong?" "I got fired." The words came out flat, hollow. "Downsizing. They eliminated my entire division. I'm out effective immediately." For a split second, less than a heartbeat, Jackson's face went completely blank. Then Claire watched in real time as emotions flickered across his features like a slideshow. Shock, confusion, and then something that made her stomach drop even though she'd expected it. Panic. Not concern. Not empathy. Not the immediate, "Oh my God, are you okay?" That should have been his first reaction. Just pure, undiluted panic. "You." He stood up so quickly his chair rolled backward and hit the wall. "You got fired? How? Why? I don't understand." "Budget cuts." Claire forced tears into her eyes, let her voice shake. "They called a division-wide meeting this morning. 12 of us gone. They said the company's restructuring, consolidating departments. My entire role is being eliminated. But you're a senior director. You're on the VP track. They can't just. They can, and they did." Claire sank into the armchair by the door, letting her head fall into her hands. 3-month severance, that's it. After 6 years with the company, 3 months and a thank you for your service. Jackson's face had gone pale. He was standing in the middle of his office, frozen, as if his brain was trying to process information it hadn't been programmed to handle. 3 months, he repeated, his voice hollow. That's only about $36,000 after taxes. Not "Are you okay?" Not "This must be devastating for you." Just immediate calculation of the severance package. "We'll be fine," Claire said, even as she watched him spiral. "It'll be tight, but we can make it work. We'll have to make some changes, obviously. We'll need to live on your income for a while, cut back on expenses. I might have to drain my investment account to cover the mortgage until I find something new. And the job market is terrible right now. It could take 6 months, maybe longer." "Live on my income?" Jackson's voice had gone up an octave. "Claire, I barely make $2,000 a month on a good month." "I know, but we'll figure it out. We're a team, right?" She looked up at him, tears now streaming down her face. Real tears, because the man she'd married, the man she'd supported and believed in, couldn't even pretend to care about her devastation. "We might have to sell the house. Move somewhere cheaper. I'll need to liquidate my 401k probably, even with the penalties. My grandmother's inheritance money, everything." Wait. Jackson held up his hands, backing away from her as if her unemployment were contagious. "Let's not make any rash decisions. We need to think about this. I need to process this." He looked around his office like he was searching for an exit, for answers, for anything other than the reality crashing down around him. "I need to call Marcus," he said suddenly, grabbing his phone from the desk. I need to talk this through with someone. Is that okay? I need to process." Claire nodded, wiping at her eyes. "Of course. I'm going to go lie down for a bit. This has been the worst day of my life." She stood and walked toward the hallway, then paused in the doorway. "Jackson, we're going to be okay, right? We'll get through this together?" He wouldn't meet her eyes. Yeah, of course. We'll figure it out. Just let me make this call." Claire retreated down the hallway, but only far enough to be out of sight. She positioned herself in the dining room, just around the corner, where she could hear everything through the open door of Jackson's office. She heard him pacing, heard his rapid breathing, heard the shaking in his hands as he dialed. Marcus. Marcus, we have a fucking problem. His voice was a frantic whisper, all the careful composure stripped away. Claire just got home. She got fired. Today. Right fucking now. A pause. Claire could imagine Marcus responding on the other end. Yes, I'm serious. She walked in, told me she got fired, her whole division was eliminated. 3-month severance, and that's it. Another pause. Jackson's voice rose, panicked and angry. Everything's ruined, Marcus. Everything. We're 7 months away from the 5-year mark. 7 months. And if she's unemployed, the spousal support calculation is based on unemployment income or whatever low-paying job she finds next. I could end up with almost nothing. Claire's hands clenched into fists. There it was, in his own words. Let me break it down for you, Jackson continued, his voice bitter now. Her investment account, $85,000. Gone. She says she'll have to drain it for living expenses. Half the home equity, $95,000, except now we might have to sell the house at a loss just to survive. Her 401k is $120,000, so my half is $60,000, but she's talking about liquidating it with penalties. And the spousal support, the whole fucking point of this, would be based on unemployment or some $40,000 a year job she finds out of desperation. He let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Marcus, we planned this perfectly. I've been the supportive husband for 4 years. I stayed underemployed so the income gap would be massive, turned down actual job offers to keep the differential high. I documented all my sacrifices, built the whole narrative about standing by her career while she climbed the ladder. I've got a calendar showing every late night she worked, every business trip, every time she chose work over us. I've positioned myself perfectly for a $2,500 a month spousal support claim for at least 3 years, maybe 5. That's $90,000 to $150,000, Marcus. Plus the asset split. We're talking about walking away with close to $300,000 total. Claire felt bile rise in her throat. The calculation was even more detailed than she'd feared. And now, Jackson's voice cracked. Now it's all going to be based on whatever she makes working retail or some entry-level position because she got fired 7 months too early. 7 fucking months. There was a longer pause. Claire could hear Jackson's breathing, ragged and sharp. What do you mean, what do I feel? I feel screwed, that's what I feel. Jackson snapped. Look, I checked out of this marriage 2 years ago, you know that. She's obsessed with work, never home, always exhausted when she is. But that income, that $145,000 plus bonuses, that made it worth waiting. That made all of this worth it. And now I've wasted 4 years, Marcus. For years of pretending to be supportive, of playing the understanding husband, of sacrificing my own career advancement. And for what? For nothing. Claire had heard enough. More than enough. She had everything she needed. She walked back to the guest bedroom, closed the door quietly, and stopped the recording. Her hands were shaking as she backed up the file to the cloud, then sent a copy to Rebecca Chandler with a single text message. Got it. Every word. Rebecca's response came within seconds. We file tomorrow. Don't let on that anything has changed. Claire sat on the guest bed, her phone clutched in her hands, and let herself feel it. The full weight of the betrayal, the calculation, the cold mercenary exploitation of 4 years of her life. Jackson hadn't just been planning to leave her. He'd been farming her, cultivating her success like a crop he intended to harvest the moment it reached peak value. But harvest season had just been canceled. And Jackson Robbins had no idea that the woman he'd underestimated for 4 years was about to show him exactly what happened when you mistook patience for weakness. Claire sat across from Rebecca Chandler at 8 a.m. the next morning, her phone on the conference table between them, the recording queued up and ready to play. Before you listen, Claire said, her voice steady despite the sleepless night, I need you to know, I've never felt more certain about anything in my life. Rebecca nodded, her expression professional but kind. Play it. Claire pressed play. Jackson's voice filled the room, frantic and bitter. Everything's ruined, Marcus. We're 7 months away from the 5-year mark. The spousal support calculation is based on unemployment income or whatever low-paying job she finds next. I could end up with almost nothing. Rebecca's eyebrows rose, but she remained silent, listening intently. Her investment account, $85,000. Half the home equity, $95,000. Her 401k is $120,000. And the spousal support, the whole fucking point of this, would be based on unemployment. When Jackson's voice confessed, I checked out of this marriage 2 years ago. That income made it worth waiting. I've wasted 4 years of pretending to be supportive. For nothing, Rebecca's jaw tightened. The recording ended. Silence filled the conference room. Well, Rebecca said finally, leaning back in her chair. That's the most comprehensive confession of financial exploitation I've heard in 15 years of practice. Can we use it? Can we use it? Rebecca's smile was sharp. Claire, this is textbook strategic positioning for spousal support fraud. He explicitly admits to deliberate underemployment, calculated timing, and building a false narrative, all for financial gain. This recording could eliminate his spousal support claim entirely and drastically reduce any asset distribution. Claire felt something loosen in her chest, vindication, relief, rage, all mixed together. What do we do now? Rebecca pulled out a legal pad already writing. We move fast and we move smart. First, your assets. The house is solely in your name, purchased before marriage. That's protected. But we need to document everything acquired during the marriage and his minimal contributions. Do you have bank records showing the financial imbalance? 4 years' worth. I've been the primary mortgage payer, utilities, groceries, everything. Jackson contributed maybe $500 a month total, if that. Perfect. Second, we change all your beneficiaries immediately. 401k, life insurance, investment accounts. Everything currently listing him gets changed to your sister or parents today. Done. I can make those calls this morning. Third, we document his browser history, search queries, anything that corroborates the recording. You said you had screenshots. Claire pulled out her phone, showing Rebecca the folder of evidence she'd compiled. Search queries dating back 14 months. The calendar documenting her work hours. Marcus Brennan's divorce settlement records, showing the $240,000 payout from his surgeon ex-wife. Rebecca whistled low. He had a mentor. That's even better for us, shows premeditation and pattern. So we file today? We file today, Rebecca confirmed. I'll have the papers drawn up by noon. We'll file by end of business, and he'll be served within 48 hours. He's going to walk into a situation he's completely unprepared for, and that recording means we have all the leverage. Claire felt a cold, calm satisfaction settle over her. Let's do it. One more thing, Rebecca said, her expression serious. For the next 2 days, you need to maintain the act. Pretend you're still devastated about the firing. Apply to jobs, seem worried about money. Don't let him suspect anything has changed. I can do that. I know you can. Rebecca smiled. You've been doing it for 2 weeks already. Claire returned home at 10 a.m. to find Jackson still in bed. Unusual for him, but then again, his entire financial strategy had imploded the day before. She made coffee, sat at the dining room table with her laptop, and began the performance of a woman desperately searching for employment. Jackson emerged around 11, looking haggard and anxious. Hey, he said, his voice soft with manufactured concern. How are you holding up? Claire looked up from her laptop, mustering a weak smile. I've been better. Just started applying to some positions. Thought I should get ahead of it. He sat down across from her, reaching across the table to take her hand. The touch made her skin crawl, but she didn't pull away. We're going to figure this out together, Jackson said, his eyes earnest and false. We're a team, right? For better or worse. The irony of those wedding vows coming from his mouth. The same mouth that had calculated her worth down to the dollar the night before, made Claire's stomach turn. But she squeezed his hand and nodded. For better or worse, she echoed. So, talk me through the severance package, Jackson said, settling into his chair with the casual tone of someone discussing weekend plans, not his wife's career devastation. 3 months' salary, you said? That's about $36,000 before taxes. About that, yes. And unemployment benefits, you'll qualify for those, right? How much do you think that would be? Claire had researched this the night before, anticipating his questions. Maybe $400 a week. It's based on income, but there's a cap. She watched him doing the mental math, watched disappointment flicker across his face. Unemployment would barely cover groceries. And you're applying to what kind of positions? He pressed. Senior director level, or are you thinking you might need to take a step down given the market? I'm casting a wide net. Director level, senior manager, anything in my field really. But those pay what? $90,000? $100,000 maybe. His voice was carefully neutral, but Claire heard the panic underneath. Lower salary meant lower spousal support calculations. If I'm lucky. The market's tough right now. I might have to take something at $70,000 or $80,000 just to get back in the door somewhere. Jackson's face went pale. That seems low. Maybe you should hold out for something at your level. With what money, Jackson? We need income. I need to take whatever I can find. He stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Right, of course. Maybe I should look at picking up more clients. Really push the consulting business. Claire almost laughed. After 4 years of minimal effort, now he wanted to increase his income? Now that her high salary was supposedly gone? That would be great, she said instead. Every bit helps. The rest of the day passed in uncomfortable domesticity. Claire applied to actual jobs. Positions she had no intention of taking, but that looked legitimate in her browser history. Jackson hovered, anxiously watching her, occasionally asking questions about her job search strategy, her networking plans, whether she'd thought about maybe contract work or consulting that might pay less but be easier to land. That evening, as they ate a silent dinner of takeout Thai food, Claire's phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Papers filed. Process server has his schedule. Thursday afternoon, 2:30 p.m. at the Starbucks on Peachtree, where he meets Marcus. Wanted somewhere public. Claire set her phone down, screen side down, and looked across the table at Jackson. He was scrolling through his own phone, barely aware of her presence, probably texting Marcus about their ruined plan. Jackson, Claire said softly. He looked up. Yeah. Thank you for being supportive through this. I know it's not what either of us planned. Something flickered across his face. Guilt, maybe, or shame, or just annoyance that his investment hadn't panned out. Of course, he said. That's what marriage is about, right? Supporting each other through the hard times. Claire smiled, and for the first time in weeks, it was genuine. Because in 48 hours, Jackson Robbins would discover exactly what marriage was actually about. And it had nothing to do with the business transaction he'd spent 4 years constructing. Thursday morning, Claire woke early and went to the gym, her first workout in months. She came home energized, showered, and dressed for success in a navy suit that made her feel powerful and in control. Job interview? Jackson asked, surprised to see her looking so professional. Just want to feel normal again, Claire replied. Fake it till you make it, right? At 2:30 p.m. exactly, her phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Served. Claire was at her desk, applying to yet another fake job, when her phone began ringing 15 minutes later. Jackson's name flashed on the screen. She let it ring 4 times before answering. Hello. What the hell is this? Jackson's voice shook with fury. Claire, what the hell is going on? Claire's voice, when she spoke, was calm. Steady. Cold. I got served with divorce papers. In public. At Starbucks. In front of Marcus and half the neighborhood. I know, Claire said simply. I filed them. Silence. Then you what? Why? You just got fired. We're supposed to be figuring this out together. I didn't get fired, Jackson. More silence. She could hear his breathing, sharp and panicked. What? I was never fired. It was a test. Claire paused, letting it sink in. And you failed. Claire was in a meeting with her actual boss. The firing had been fiction, after all, when her phone lit up with Rebecca's text at 2:35 p.m. Served. Clean delivery. He's not taking it well. She excused herself to the hallway, adrenaline singing through her veins. Her phone started ringing almost immediately. Jackson's name flashed across the screen once, twice, 3 times. She declined each call, watching the notifications pile up. Text messages began flooding in. Call me now. Claire, what the hell? This is insane, you need to call me, Claire. She waited through 5 calls, letting him spiral, letting the reality of his situation sink in. Then, when the sixth call came through, she answered. Her voice was perfectly calm. Professional, even. Hello, Jackson. What the hell is this? His voice wasn't sad or hurt or confused. It was pure rage, the fury of someone whose carefully laid plans had just detonated in his face. Claire, what the hell is going on? I just got served with divorce papers. Divorce papers. In the middle of Starbucks, in front of Marcus, in front of everyone. I know, Claire said simply. I filed them. The silence on the other end was so complete she could hear ambient coffee shop noise in the background. The hiss of the espresso machine, someone ordering a latte. You, Jackson's voice cracked. You filed for divorce? Why? We're supposed to be working through your job loss together. We just talked about this yesterday. I didn't lose my job, Jackson. Another beat of silence, this one heavier. What are you talking about? You came home devastated. You said you got fired. I lied. Claire let the words hang in the air, cold and final. I was never fired. It was a test. She heard his sharp intake of breath, heard him trying to process what she'd just said. A test? What kind of sick, Claire, you lied to me. You deliberately lied to manipulate me? The audacity of that statement, coming from him, of all people, made Claire laugh. Actually laugh, a sound without humor that echoed in the empty hallway. I lied, she repeated, her voice hardening to steel. That's really what you want to lead with right now? I lied. Yes. You made me think you lost your job, that we were in financial crisis. And your immediate reaction wasn't concern for me, Jackson. It wasn't are you okay, or we'll get through this together. Your immediate reaction was panic about money, about your timeline, about your spousal support calculations. Silence. I don't know what you're. I have the recording, Jackson. She heard him stop breathing. What recording? The phone call you made to Marcus. Every single word. We're 7 months away from the 5-year mark. The spousal support calculation is ruined. I've wasted 4 years of pretending to be supportive. Should I go on? You were listening. You were spying on a private conversation. I was standing in my own home, Jackson. My home that I bought with my money before I ever met you. And you were making a phone call that revealed you've been planning to divorce me for over a year, that you've deliberately stayed underemployed to maximize your spousal support claim, that you've been calculating my worth down to the dollar while positioning yourself as the sacrificing supportive husband. Claire, you're taking things out of context. Am I? Her voice cut like glass. So you didn't tell Marcus you checked out of our marriage 2 years ago? You didn't say that my income was the only thing that made staying worth it? You didn't explicitly calculate that you could walk away with close to $300,000 if you just waited until that 5-year mark. She could hear him trying to formulate a response, could practically hear his mind racing through excuses, deflections, justifications. I was venting to a friend. People say things when they're frustrated. For 14 months, Jackson? Because that's how far back your search history goes. How long to get spousal support. Maximize alimony from working wife. Strategic underemployment. You weren't venting. You were executing a plan. You went through my computer? Jesus, Claire, what happened to trust? Trust. The word exploded from her. You want to talk about trust? You turned down actual job offers to keep the income gap wide. You documented my work hours like you were building a legal case. Because you were building a legal case. You consulted with Marcus about his $240,000 settlement from his surgeon ex-wife and decided to replicate his strategy with me. How do you know about Marcus's? Public records, Jackson. Divorce settlements are public records. And Marcus was your mentor in this, wasn't he? Your advisor. The one who taught you how to exploit a high-earning wife. She heard voices in the background, heard Marcus saying something she couldn't make out, heard Jackson moving, probably stepping outside for privacy he should have sought 10 minutes ago. Claire, listen to me. His voice had shifted now, from rage to something approximating reason. Even if I said some things that sounded bad, you can't just, we've been married 4 years. I'm entitled to some consideration in a divorce. Here's what you're entitled to, Claire interrupted, her voice like ice. You're entitled to exactly what the law provides for a short-term marriage, where one spouse deliberately underemployed themselves as a strategic positioning for divorce. Which, according to my attorney, is not very much. Your attorney? He sounded genuinely shocked, as if she couldn't possibly have been smart enough to outmaneuver him. You already have an attorney? I've had an attorney for 2 weeks, Jackson. The same 2 weeks you've been watching me apply for jobs and asking about my severance package and unemployment benefits. The same 2 weeks you've been calculating how my supposed job loss would destroy your financial exit strategy. This is Claire, this is insane. We can work this out. No, she said flatly. We can't. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to receive a settlement offer that includes minimal asset distribution based on your actual contributions to our marriage, which amount to almost nothing since I paid for virtually everything. You'll get half of the small amount of equity you contributed to my mortgage. You'll keep your car and your personal property, and you'll get exactly $0 in spousal support. That's not fair. Fair. Claire's voice rose. You think fair is spending 4 years treating our marriage like a long-term investment strategy? You think fair is deliberately sabotaging your own career prospects to maintain an income gap you could exploit? You think fair is documenting my work commitments like evidence in a trial while publicly performing the role of supportive husband on social media. I deserve something for the years I put into this marriage. You deserve exactly what you contributed, which was almost nothing. My house that I bought before we met. My 401k that I built before and during our marriage. My grandmother's inheritance that you tried repeatedly to get me to put in both our names. My income that you wanted to time a divorce around to maximize your payout. None of that is yours, Jackson. None of it ever was. You can't prove. I can prove all of it. I have the recording of your conversation with Marcus. Admissible in court because it was recorded in my own home with my own device. I have your search history going back over a year. I have bank records showing the financial imbalance in our marriage. I have Marcus's divorce settlement showing the blueprint you were following. And I have your own words, Jackson. Your own admission that you checked out 2 years ago but stayed for the money. She heard him breathing hard, heard the desperation creeping into his voice. Claire, please. Can we just talk about this face to face? Can we? No. We'll communicate through our attorneys from this point forward. You'll receive the settlement offer by Monday. You can accept it, or we can go to court and I'll play that recording for a judge. Your choice. You manipulative, you lied to me. You set me up with this fake firing. I gave you a test, Claire corrected coldly. I removed the money you were staying for and watched what you did. And what you did was immediately calculate your losses and complain to your mentor about how your 4-year investment in exploiting me had been ruined. You revealed exactly who you are, Jackson. Someone who sees marriage as a financial transaction and wives as assets to be harvested. That's not, I never. You played a game, Claire said, her voice dropping to something quiet and final. You just didn't realize I was smart enough to figure out I was playing too. And unlike you, Jackson, I actually won. She ended the call before he could respond. Her hands were shaking, adrenaline flooding her system, but underneath the trembling was something solid and unshakable. Certainty. Power. The cold, clean satisfaction of someone who'd been underestimated and had just proven exactly how costly that mistake could be. Her phone immediately started ringing again. Jackson's name flashed across the screen. Claire declined the call, then blocked his number. She had work to do, a real career to get back to, and a life to rebuild. One that didn't include a man who'd spent 4 years calculating her net worth while pretending to love her. Rebecca's text came through a moment later. How did it go? Claire smiled as she typed her response. He never saw it coming. Good, Rebecca wrote back. That's exactly how it should be. Jackson moved out within 48 hours. Claire came home from work on Saturday to find half the furniture gone. His desk, his chair, the TV from the living room, the expensive espresso machine she'd bought last Christmas. Petty theft disguised as reclaiming property, as if a $400 coffee maker would somehow compensate for his collapsed financial strategy. She didn't care. Let him have it. She wanted every trace of him gone. Rebecca scheduled the settlement conference for the following Tuesday. Claire arrived at the law office 15 minutes early, dressed in a charcoal suit that meant business, her evidence files organized in a leather portfolio. She felt calm, focused, ready. Jackson arrived with his attorney, a middle-aged man named Richard Voss, who had the weary look of someone who'd already been briefed on just how bad his client's situation was. Jackson himself looked terrible, unshaven, rumpled, his eyes red-rimmed from either lack of sleep or crying or both. Good, Claire thought coldly. They sat on opposite sides of the conference table, Rebecca and Claire on one side, Jackson and Richard on the other. The air in the room was thick with tension. "Let's begin," Rebecca said crisply. "Mr. Voss, I assume you've reviewed the initial filing and evidence we provided?" Richard cleared his throat. "We have. And my client has several concerns about the admissibility of the recording that forms the basis of your allegations. The recording was made by Mrs. Robbins in her own home using her own device," Rebecca interrupted smoothly. "Georgia is a one-party consent state. The recording is completely legal and admissible. But my client had a reasonable expectation of privacy. In a phone conversation held in the middle of the home's common areas? No, counselor, he did not." Rebecca slid a document across the table. "I've prepared a legal brief on the admissibility issue if you'd like to review it. But I assure you, we're on solid ground." Jackson leaned forward, his voice tight. "Even if the recording is legal, I was venting to a friend. People say things they don't mean when they're upset. For 14 months? Claire spoke for the first time, her voice cutting. She opened her portfolio and slid printouts across the table. "These are screenshots of your search history, Jackson. How long married to get spousal support? Maximize alimony from working wife. Strategic underemployment spousal support. The earliest query is dated 14 months ago." Jackson's face flushed. "You had no right to go through my computer." "I had every right. It's my computer, purchased with my money, on my home network." She slid another document across. "Bank records showing 4 years of household expenses. I paid 94% of our mortgage, 100% of utilities, 97% of groceries. Your average monthly contribution to household expenses was $437. I was building a business. You were deliberately staying underemployed." Claire's voice remained level, factual. "You turned down a job offer from Marcus's consulting firm 18 months ago that would have paid $65,000 annually. Marcus confirmed it in a text message to you where he said, 'Keep the income gap wide for the support calculation.'" Richard shot Jackson a look that suggested this was news to him. "And speaking of Marcus," Rebecca continued, sliding another file across the table, "Mr. Marcus Brennan's divorce settlement from Dr. Sophia Brennan. He received $175,000 in asset distribution plus $2,000 monthly spousal support for 3 years. Total package approximately $240,000. Your client used Mr. Brennan as a consultant and mentor in strategizing a similar outcome from his marriage to Mrs. Robbins." "That's speculation. It's documented in the recording," Rebecca said flatly. "Mr. Robbins refers to Marcus as his advisor and states we planned this perfectly. He explicitly outlines the strategy: deliberate underemployment, documentation of his wife's work hours, public positioning as the supportive husband, timing the divorce to the 5-year mark for maximum spousal support duration." Jackson slumped in his chair. Richard looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. "Here's our settlement offer," Rebecca said, sliding a formal document across the table. "Mr. Robbins receives 10% of the home equity, which amounts to $9,500, the approximate total of his actual mortgage contributions over 4 years. He keeps his personal vehicle and personal property. No spousal support given the documented evidence of strategic positioning and mercenary intent." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Jackson exploded. "This is nothing. This is insulting. I'm entitled to half of everything you earned during our marriage. You're entitled to an equitable distribution based on your contributions to the marriage," Rebecca corrected, her voice ice cold. "Equitable doesn't mean equal when one spouse deliberately sabotaged their own earning potential as a strategy to exploit the other's success. You turned down job offers, Jackson. You documented your wife's work schedule like evidence for a trial. You consulted with a friend who successfully executed the same strategy against his high-earning wife. The recording proves your intent was financial exploitation, not partnership. I put 4 years into this marriage. You put 4 years into a long-term investment strategy," Claire said quietly. "Your own words, Jackson. I've wasted 4 years of pretending to be supportive." Those are the words of someone running a con, not building a marriage. Mrs. Robbins's offer is more than generous given the circumstances, Rebecca continued. The alternative is we go to court, play the recording for a judge, present all of this evidence, and let the court decide. I feel confident predicting you'd walk away with even less. Richard leaned over to whisper urgently to Jackson. Claire watched Jackson's face cycle through emotions: rage, disbelief, calculation, and finally something that might have been the first stirrings of real fear. We need time to consider, Richard said finally. You have until Monday at 5 p.m., Rebecca replied. After that, we proceed to litigation. The meeting ended with nothing resolved. Jackson left without looking at Claire, his shoulders hunched, his attorney's hand on his back in what might have been comfort or guidance. Claire felt nothing watching him go. No satisfaction, no vindication. Just a cold, hollow relief that this was almost over. Monday afternoon, Richard Voss sent the counteroffer. $75,000 lump sum plus 1 year of limited spousal support at $1,500 per month. $93,000 total. Rebecca called Claire immediately. They're trying to split the difference. It's a negotiating tactic. Reject it, Claire said without hesitation. You're sure? We could probably negotiate them down to $50,000. I'm sure. The offer stands. $9,500, no support. If Jackson wants more, we go to court and let a judge hear him explain his 4-year financial exploitation strategy. Rebecca's smile was audible through the phone. I'll let them know. The rejection went out within the hour. Jackson called that evening, somehow having gotten her new number. Claire almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Claire, please. His voice was desperate, stripped of all pretense. You're destroying me. $9,500 won't even cover first and last month's rent on an apartment. I can't live on that. You have a business degree and 4 years of consulting experience on your resume, Claire replied calmly. Get a job, Jackson. An actual job. Support yourself the way most adults do. After being out of the workforce for years, no one's going to hire me. You weren't out of the workforce. You were underemployed by choice. That's not my problem. We were married for 4 years. I deserve something. You deserve exactly what you contributed, Claire said, which was almost nothing except strategy and calculation. You wanted to treat our marriage like a business transaction? Fine. This is your return on investment. I don't have anywhere to go. Marcus can't let me stay forever. Then I suggest you start figuring out how to support yourself. That's what I've been doing my entire adult life. How can you be so cold? I loved you. No, Claire interrupted, her voice final. You loved my income. You loved what I could provide. You checked out of loving me 2 years ago. Your words, Jackson, not mine. You just stayed for the money. Silence on the other end. Then, quietly, what if I agree to your offer? Then we sign papers, the divorce is finalized, and we both move on with our lives. And that's it? For years, and that's all it means to you. Claire closed her eyes. 4 years meant everything to me, Jackson. I thought we were building a life together. I thought we were partners. But you were running numbers and waiting for a payout. So yes, that's it. That's all that's left. She heard him breathing, heard what might have been a sob or just exhausted resignation. I'll sign, he said finally. I'll sign your papers. Your attorney will receive the finalized documents tomorrow, Claire replied. Goodbye, Jackson. She ended the call, blocked the new number, and sat in the silence of her home. Her home that she'd bought, her home that she'd maintained, her home that had never really been theirs because Jackson had never truly been present in it. The comfortable life he'd planned to fund with her money was gone. The retirement plan he'd calculated for years had evaporated. And Jackson Robbins would have to do what he'd avoided for 4 years. Actually work to support himself, live within his means, and figure out who he was without someone else's success to exploit. Meanwhile, Claire had her life back. And that, she realized, was worth more than any settlement could ever be. 3 weeks after Jackson signed the settlement papers, Claire's phone rang with an unfamiliar number. She almost declined. She'd gotten good at screening calls, but something made her answer. Claire? It's Marcus Brennan. She nearly hung up immediately. Marcus, the architect of Jackson's exploitation strategy, the mentor who'd taught her husband how to treat marriage as a financial investment. I know you have no reason to talk to me, Marcus continued quickly, as if sensing her finger hovering over the end call button. But I need to speak with you. Just 30 minutes. Please. There's a coffee shop on Highland Avenue, neutral ground. I just need to explain some things. Claire should have said no. Should have hung up and blocked the number. But something in his voice, guilt maybe or desperation, made her pause. One coffee, she said finally. 30 minutes. That's it. Thank you. Tomorrow at 10? Fine. She regretted it the moment she hung up. What could Marcus possibly say that would matter? What explanation could justify what he'd done? But the next morning, she found herself walking into the small cafe on Highland, scanning the room until she spotted Marcus at a corner table. He looked terrible, like he'd aged 5 years in 3 weeks. Unshaven, hollow-eyed, wearing a wrinkled shirt that suggested he'd slept in it. Claire. He stood when she approached, and she saw his hands were shaking. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. I'm not sure why I did, Claire replied, sitting down across from him. You have 30 minutes, Marcus. Start talking. He wrapped his hands around his coffee cup like he needed something to anchor himself. I need to apologize. Not because I expect forgiveness. I don't. But because you deserve to hear it. What I did to your marriage, the role I played, it's eating me alive. Good, Claire said flatly. Marcus winced but nodded. I deserve that. I deserve worse. But I need you to understand how it happened, not as an excuse, but as an explanation. Claire said nothing, waiting. 3 years ago, I divorced my wife Sophia, Marcus began. She's a cardiovascular surgeon, brilliant, driven, earning around $400,000 a year. I was doing consulting work, bringing in maybe $50,000 if I was lucky. Our marriage was struggling. She worked insane hours, was always on call, always exhausted. I felt invisible, irrelevant, like I was just furniture in a life she was too busy to live. He took a shaky breath. When we divorced, my attorney told me I was entitled to spousal support, that I'd supported her career by handling domestic things while she built her practice. The settlement was $175,000 plus $2,000 a month for 3 years. Total package around $240,000. I know, Claire said. Public records. Right. Marcus looked down at his coffee. At the time, I felt like I'd won something. Like I'd finally gotten compensation for years of feeling less than, for sacrificing my own ambitions while she soared. I told myself I deserved it, that it was only fair. But you didn't sacrifice your ambitions, Claire said quietly. You just didn't work as hard as she did. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he nodded. You're right. That's the truth I've been avoiding. I wasn't underemployed because I was supporting her career. I was underemployed because I chose to be, because it was easier than actually building something meaningful. But the settlement let me pretend otherwise. And then Jackson married me. And then Jackson married you. Marcus met her eyes. When Jackson told me about you, this incredible woman, VP track, 6-figure income, I saw an opportunity to share my wisdom. I made it sound like spousal support was his right, his due compensation for being married to a successful woman. I didn't explicitly tell him to plan a divorce, but I planted every seed. Claire felt her hands clench into fists under the table. I coached him, Marcus continued, his voice dropping. Told him to turn down opportunities that might increase his income. To document every time you worked late, every business trip, every moment you were choosing career over marriage. I told him to build a public narrative of being the supportive husband who sacrificed for your success, to position himself perfectly for a spousal support claim. You taught him to exploit me. Yes. Marcus's voice cracked. I taught him exactly that. And I told myself I was helping a friend, sharing strategies that had worked for me. But the truth is, I was turning your marriage into the same transactional nightmare my marriage had become. Why are you telling me this now? Claire asked. Jackson's already signed the settlement. The divorce is done. What do you want from me, absolution? No. God, no. Marcus shook his head. I'm telling you because Jackson wasn't always like this. In the beginning of your marriage, he genuinely tried. He pitched his consulting business to real clients, worked long hours, actually attempted to build something. But after a few failures, after a few rejections, I was there telling him he didn't need to keep struggling. That your success could be his success. that being married to a high earner was its own kind of career. Claire felt something twist in her chest. She'd seen those early efforts, remembered Jackson excited about a potential client, remembered him staying up late working on proposals. I poisoned him against you gradually, Marcus said. Made him resentful of your success instead of proud of it. Encouraged him to see you working late as abandonment instead of ambition. Told him to view your income as a resource to be claimed rather than a partnership to be celebrated. I turned a man who loved you into someone who calculated your net worth. He made his own choices, Claire said, but her voice was less certain now. He did, Marcus agreed. Adults are responsible for their own decisions. But I gave him permission, Claire. I showed him how, encouraged him, coached him every step of the way. And now he's drowning. No job prospects, no money, staying on my couch because he can't afford rent. And I look at what I helped create, and it makes me sick. They sat in silence for a long moment. Claire felt her certainty wavering, felt the clean narrative of victim and villain becoming more complicated than she wanted it to be. Why are you really here, Marcus? She asked finally. Because I need to face what I've done. And because maybe if I tell you the truth about my role, it might help you understand that Jackson wasn't born a con artist. He was taught to be one. By me. That doesn't change what he did. No, it doesn't. He still made the choice to listen, to execute the strategy, to stay in your marriage for financial gain. He's still responsible for that. Marcus looked directly at her. But I'm responsible for teaching him. And I need you to know that. Whatever happens next, whatever you think of Jackson, know that he had a mentor in manipulation. And that mentor was me. Claire stood abruptly. Your 30 minutes are up. Marcus stood as well, not arguing. Thank you for listening. I know it doesn't change anything. Claire turned to leave, then paused. Does Sophia know? Your ex-wife. Does she know what you've been teaching Jackson? Marcus's face went white. What? No, why would? Just wondering, Claire said. Public records work both ways, Marcus. And women talk to each other. She left him standing there, watching understanding and fear dawn on his face. That night, Claire did something she'd been avoiding. She opened the boxes of photos and mementos from her marriage, the ones she'd packed away planning to throw out. There were pictures from their wedding, Jackson's face full of genuine joy. Photos from early dates, hiking trips, a cooking class they'd taken together, his birthday party where he'd looked at her like she was everything. She found emails from the first year of their marriage. Jackson excited about landing a client. Just signed a $15,000 consulting contract. Maybe this business will actually work. Claire's response. I'm so proud of you. You're going to build something amazing. His response. With you by my side, I can do anything. When had that changed? When had his excitement curdled into resentment? When had Marcus's poison transformed genuine effort into strategic exploitation? Claire closed the laptop, feeling something uncomfortable and unwelcome. Not forgiveness, but understanding. Jackson had made his choices, yes. But those choices had been influenced, shaped, coached by someone who'd already walked that path and profited from it. It didn't excuse what Jackson had done. Didn't erase the betrayal, or the calculation, or the 4 years of manipulation. But it complicated the story. Made it messier, more human, harder to reduce to simple victim and villain. And Claire wasn't sure how she felt about that. The divorce decree arrived via email on a Tuesday in March, clinical and final. Case number, filing date, dissolution of marriage effective immediately. Claire stared at the PDF on her screen, waiting to feel something, sadness, relief, regret. Instead, she felt free. 3 months later, Claire's life had transformed so completely that her marriage felt like something that had happened to someone else in another lifetime. The promotion to VP came through in May, complete with a substantial salary increased to $185,000 and stock options that would vest over the next 4 years. Her new office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Atlanta skyline. She'd moved into a modern apartment in Midtown, smaller than the house but entirely hers, filled with furniture she'd chosen, art she loved, space that breathed with possibility rather than resentment. She'd started running again, something she'd abandoned during her marriage. Joined a book club. Took a weekend trip to Asheville with her sister, just because she could. Started therapy to work through the betrayal and guilt and complicated feelings about trust. And she'd been on several dates with Daniel Chandler, a fellow executive at a competing tech firm whom she'd met at an industry conference. He was successful in his own right, secure enough to celebrate her achievements rather than resent them, interested in her thoughts and her work and her as a person, not as an income stream to be mined. "I like that you're ambitious," he'd said on their third date. "It's attractive. I don't understand men who feel threatened by successful women." Claire had nearly cried into her wine. Life, she was discovering, could be good, could be hers, could be built on authentic connection rather than calculated exploitation. Then her assistant mentioned seeing Marcus at a professional networking event. "He looked rough," Tasha said, setting Claire's afternoon coffee on her desk. "Like really rough. Distracted, stressed, kept checking his phone. I almost didn't recognize him." Claire felt a flicker of curiosity, despite herself. "When was this?" "Last week. The marketing professional's mixer at the Ritz. I thought about saying something to him, but he looked like he didn't want to be bothered." That evening, Claire found herself staring at her phone, Marcus's number still in her contacts from their coffee meeting months ago. She shouldn't care. His problems weren't hers. He'd coached Jackson in exploiting her. Why should she concern herself with his well-being? But something Marcus had said in that cafe had stayed with her. Adults are responsible for their own decisions. She sent a text. "Heard you're going through something. Coffee if you want to talk." His response came within minutes. "Please. Same place? Tomorrow 10 a.m.? Claire arrived to find Marcus looking worse than he had 3 months ago. He'd lost weight, his clothes hung loose, and there was a desperate exhaustion in his eyes that went beyond physical tiredness. "Thank you for reaching out," he said before she'd even sat down. "I wasn't sure you would after everything." "I wasn't sure I would either," Claire admitted. "But I heard you were struggling. What's going on?" Marcus laughed, but it was bitter and hollow. "Karma, Claire. That's what's going on. Pure, unavoidable karma." He pulled out his phone, opening an email that he turned toward her. Legal letterhead, formal language, devastating content. "Sophia, my ex-wife. She's reopening our divorce settlement. Her attorney is arguing I fraudulently obtained spousal support through strategic underemployment and manipulation." His voice cracked. "She knows about Jackson. She knows everything." Claire felt her stomach drop. "How?" "Text messages. Emails. 3 years' worth of communications between Jackson and me where I coached him on the strategy. How to maximize payouts from successful wives. How to position yourself as the sacrificing spouse. How to document everything for a spousal support claim." Marcus looked like he might be sick. "Sophia's attorney subpoenaed my phone records as part of the reopening. They found all of it." "Oh, Marcus. It gets worse. They're not just arguing I defrauded Sophia. They're arguing I engaged in a pattern of helping others commit spousal support fraud. Jackson's divorce is being cited as evidence. The recording you made, the settlement documents, everything is part of their case now." Claire sat back in her chair, processing. "What does that mean for you?" "It means I could lose most or all of the settlement. The $175,000 lump sum plus the $72,000 in spousal support I already received. Sophia's attorney is demanding I repay $200,000. He ran his hands through his hair. "Money I've already spent, Claire. The apartment upgrade, the new car, the lifestyle changes. I've got maybe $30,000 left. I'm looking at bankruptcy. Maybe worse." Her attorney mentioned possible fraud charges. Despite everything Marcus had done, Claire felt an unexpected stir of compassion. Nobody deserves bankruptcy. "Don't I?" Marcus looked at her directly. "I coached someone to exploit their spouse, Claire. I turned your marriage into a business transaction for my friend's profit. I built my own settlement on lies about sacrificing for Sophia's career when the truth was I just didn't want to work as hard as she did." His voice dropped. "Sophia's attorney is right. I committed fraud. And I taught Jackson to do the same thing." "Actions have consequences," Claire said quietly. "They do." Marcus nodded. "And maybe I need to face mine. Maybe this is how I learned that treating relationships as transactions destroys everyone involved, including the people doing the exploiting." They sat in silence for a moment. Claire thought about Jackson, about Marcus's role in his transformation, about the complicated web of influence and choice and responsibility. "What does Jackson think about all this?" she asked. Marcus's expression darkened. "He's furious. Blames me for everything. Says I ruined his life by giving him bad advice, that he never would have thought to exploit you if I hadn't planted the idea. He moved out of my place 2 weeks ago. We haven't spoken since. Is he working? Last I heard, he got a job in sales at some startup, making $55,000. Living in a studio apartment in a rough part of town. Bitter, broke, and angry at everyone except himself." Claire absorbed this. Jackson working an actual job, supporting himself, facing reality. It should have felt like victory, but it just felt sad. "What are you going to do?" she asked Marcus. "Fight it, I guess. Get a lawyer. Try to prove that even though my intentions were terrible, the original settlement was legally valid." But honestly, he looked defeated. "Maybe I should just accept it. Declare bankruptcy. Start over. Try to become a person who doesn't help destroy marriages for financial gain." Claire considered her next words carefully. "For what it's worth, I think you explaining your role to me, owning what you did, that took courage. It doesn't erase the damage, but it's something. Is it enough? I don't know," Claire said honestly. "But it's a start." Marcus nodded, looking more defeated than she'd ever seen him. "Jackson hates me. Sophia's suing me. I'm about to lose everything. But you know what? I think I finally understand what I did. Not just legally, but morally. I helped turn love into a business deal. And that poison doesn't just hurt the victims, it destroys everyone it touches." Claire stood to leave, then paused. "Marcus, would you be willing to give a statement? About your role in coaching Jackson, about the pattern of exploitation? If Sophia's attorney contacted you." He looked surprised. "You want me to help prove I'm a fraud? I want you to take responsibility. There's a difference between being caught and choosing accountability." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Yeah, I'll give a statement. It's the least I can do." That evening, Claire did something she hadn't done since signing the divorce papers. She pulled up Jackson's contact information, the new number he'd gotten after she'd blocked his old one, and sent a text. "We need to talk." "About Marcus." The response came within minutes. "Why would I want to talk about that bastard?" "Because he's facing consequences for his role in what happened. And I think you might have some responsibility in how this plays out." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Finally, fine. When?" "Tomorrow. Same coffee shop Marcus and I have been using. 2 p.m. I'll be there." Claire set down her phone, her heart beating faster than she expected. She hadn't seen Jackson since the settlement meeting, hadn't heard his voice since that desperate phone call where he begged for more money. She wasn't sure what she wanted from this conversation. Closure? Understanding? Some kind of resolution? Or maybe she just needed to see if the man she'd married was still in there somewhere, beneath all the calculation and exploitation and bitterness. Maybe she needed to know if redemption was possible. Not for her benefit, she was moving forward just fine without him. But because if people like Marcus and Jackson couldn't change, couldn't learn, couldn't become better than their worst choices, then what hope was there for any of them? Tomorrow would tell. Claire arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early, needing time to prepare herself for seeing Jackson again. She ordered a latte, chose a table by the window, and tried to identify what she was feeling. Not anger anymore, that had faded. Not hurt exactly. Just a strange mixture of curiosity and caution, like approaching something that used to be dangerous but might not be anymore. Jackson walked in at exactly 2 p.m. Claire barely recognized him. He'd lost weight, but in a healthy way, like someone who'd started exercising rather than someone wasting away. His clothes were neat but modest, off-the-rack business casual rather than the expensive brands he'd preferred when living off her income. His hair was shorter, his posture different. Less performative, more genuine. He looked, Claire realized with surprise, like someone who'd been working. "Claire." He sat down across from her, his hands wrapped around a coffee cup he'd brought from the counter. "Thanks for agreeing to meet." "Thanks for coming." They sat in awkward silence for a moment. Then Jackson spoke. "You look good." "Happy." "I am," Claire said simply. "Life is good." "I'm glad." He seemed to mean it. "You deserved better than what I put you through." Claire nodded, acknowledging the statement without diving into it yet. I asked you here to talk about Marcus. Jackson's expression darkened. I don't want to talk about Marcus. He's the reason everything fell apart. Marcus is facing legal consequences for coaching you on how to exploit me, Claire interrupted. His ex-wife is reopening their divorce settlement. She's demanding he repay $200,000. He could face bankruptcy, possibly fraud charges. Good, Jackson said bitterly. He deserves it. He's the one who taught me all that strategic positioning bullshit. I never would have thought of any of it if he hadn't. Stop. Claire's voice was firm. Marcus planted seeds, yes. But you watered them. You made the choice to listen, to execute his strategy, to stay in our marriage for financial gain. Own that. Jackson looked away, jaw tight. But after a moment, he nodded. You're right. I made my own choices. Marcus's attorney contacted me. They want statements from both of us, acknowledging his coaching role but clarifying that you're an adult who made your own decisions. I'm going to provide one. I think you should too. Jackson stared at her. You want me to help Marcus? After everything he did to you, to us? I want you to tell the truth, Claire corrected. Marcus influenced you. He gave you terrible advice and permission to view marriage as a financial transaction. But he didn't force you to take it. The truth is complicated, Jackson. People can be both victims of bad influence and responsible for their own choices. Why would you help him at all? Claire considered the question carefully. Because revenge isn't the same as justice. Marcus is facing consequences for what he did, serious consequences. But destroying him completely won't undo what happened to me. It won't give me back those 4 years. And honestly, I'm tired of carrying anger around. It's exhausting, and it's taking up space I'd rather fill with better things. Jackson was quiet for a long moment. Then, I'll do it. I'll give a statement. Thank you. But I need you to know something first. Jackson set down his coffee cup. I've been in therapy. 2 months now, twice a week. Working through a lot of shit about entitlement and money and self-worth. That's good, Jackson. Really. My therapist has a term for what I had. Success resentment. She says I tied my self-worth so completely to income that when my businesses failed, I didn't just feel like a failure, I felt like I stopped existing. And when you kept succeeding, kept climbing, I started resenting your success instead of celebrating it. His voice dropped. Marcus gave me permission to see you as a resource instead of a partner. But I chose to take that permission. That's on me. Claire felt something loosen in her chest, not forgiveness yet, but acknowledgement. What are you doing now? Working in sales at a tech startup. B2B software. Making $55,000 a year. He laughed without humor. When they offered me the position, I was insulted. $55,000 felt like nothing compared to what I thought I deserved. But you know what? I'm actually good at it. I'm contributing value, earning my own way, supporting myself. And weirdly, I feel more like myself than I have in years. I'm genuinely glad to hear that. The therapist says I have a long way to go. That I need to rebuild my relationship with work and money and my own worth. But I'm trying, Claire. I'm actually trying now instead of just calculating angles. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Claire said something that surprised even herself. I forgive you, Jackson. His eyes widened. What? I forgive you. Not because what you did was okay. It wasn't. Not because I want to reconcile or be friends or pretend it didn't happen. But because holding on to anger was hurting me more than it was hurting you. Forgiving you isn't about you. It's about me taking my power back completely. Jackson's eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve that. Probably not, Claire agreed. But I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for me. I'm choosing to let go of the bitterness so I can fully move forward. Thank you, he whispered. I know I can't undo what I did, but thank you. They talked for another hour. Not as a married couple, not as bitter enemies, but as two people who'd shared a life and were both trying to learn from their mistakes. Jackson told her about his tiny studio apartment, his therapy sessions, his slowly rebuilding relationship with work. Claire told him about her promotion, her new apartment, about Daniel. He sounds like a good guy, Jackson said, and seemed to mean it. He is. He celebrates my success instead of resenting it. That's how it should be. Jackson looked down at his hands. I'm sorry I couldn't be that person for you. I'm sorry too. But we both get to move forward now. Build better lives. When they parted ways, there was no hug, no dramatic reconciliation. Just a nod of mutual understanding and respect. 2 weeks later, both Claire and Jackson submitted statements to Sophia Brennan's attorney. They acknowledged Marcus's coaching role while making clear that Jackson had been a willing participant in the strategy, not a manipulated victim. The judge in Marcus's case ultimately reduced the clawback to $60,000 payable over 5 years. Still significant, but not the complete financial devastation he'd been facing. Marcus would have to work, rebuild, learn to earn his own way. Just like Jackson was learning. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Claire stood in her office looking out at the Atlanta skyline, thinking about how far she'd come. She was thriving at work. Her VP role gave her opportunities she'd only dreamed about. Her relationship with Daniel was deepening into something real and healthy, built on mutual respect and genuine partnership. She'd rebuilt her sense of self-worth completely, no longer carrying guilt about her success or feeling responsible for others' choices. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister. "Dinner tonight? Want to hear about your week?" Claire smiled, typing back. "Perfect. 7 p.m. She thought about Jackson sometimes, hoped he was continuing his therapy and building a genuine career. She thought about Marcus, hoped he was learning from his consequences. But mostly, she thought about herself, about the life she was building, the person she was becoming. The lesson she'd learned wasn't about revenge or even justice. It was simpler and more profound. Success doesn't make you a target unless you choose people who see you that way. Her worth wasn't measured by what others tried to take from her, but by what she built for herself. The most empowering ending wasn't destroying Jackson or Marcus. It was choosing herself, forgiving for her own peace, and building a life where her value was intrinsic, not dependent on anyone else's validation or exploitation. Claire Robbins had been tested by a lie she told. But what she discovered was the truth about herself. Strong enough to protect what mattered, wise enough to let go of what didn't, and brave enough to build something better from the ruins of what had fallen apart. That was worth more than any settlement, any revenge, any vindication. That was freedom.